Noah Dalzell. Welcome to the Sport Profile.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. We were just talking about your Cape Cod trip. How was that? How was it to disconnect? And I know you said you don't get to do it often. So when you do get those rare opportunities, what are some things you like to do to really turn off and go off the grid?
Yeah, I never really go off the grid just because, as a sports reporter, there's always news that breaks, and you can say, I'm not going to work today, but then if your franchise player that you cover gets traded and you decide not to work that day, it's kind of a bummer. So I'm always kind of keeping tabs on what's going on in the sports world, but honestly, it doesn't feel like work, so it's not like I'm buried in things I don't want to see. But it is nice to take some time sometimes to not write for a few days, just because you're writing so much, you're podcasting so much, you're talking so much that the reset can be really helpful.
Totally. So what are some things you like to do to achieve that reset? When you really don't want to look at a transaction or, news update, when you really want to just take a break, what are some things you like to do to help keep yourself grounded?
Believe it or not, sometimes I like to just watch basketball without having to write about it. So, for example, I don't have to write about every single game that I cover, but I usually do.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's for a couple of games I might just watch, and then you start to notice things that maybe you wouldn't always notice, or you notice certain interactions on the bench or something going on in the arena, or even on TV, you might notice something schematically that's going on that you didn't notice. That if I was so worried about having a post-game story every single game, I might miss those things. So sometimes it's just changing that, and then other times it's just doing other things like working out, hanging out with friends and family, just disconnecting. But again, I always emphasize, this is not heavy stuff. This is as light as it gets as far as work. So it's actually pretty rare that I feel like I need to step away altogether.
No, that makes sense. I've heard from a lot of people that to take a break, in your case, basketball, watching a game is the last thing they want to do because they're so entrenched in it. They can't view a basketball game the same way anymore. So it's really interesting that you lean into that.
Yeah, I do. Because I honestly love basketball so much that it has never gotten to the point where I'm the game itself is draining. The thing that gets the most draining, honestly, is social media. If anything, that's the thing you want to step away from. But it's hard because social media is honestly a part of the job. You
of course
get the news, you share the news, you live tweet games. It's part of the work. So that's the part that if there's anything that I sometimes I'm I need a break, it's the social media aspect. It's really never the basketball or even the writing is very rare that I feel okay, I want to step away from this for a couple days. But it's just the online world is just draining. I think everybody kind of knows that for different reasons.
Oh yeah, I definitely do myself. Something I really loved about your story and kind of resonated with me a little bit was, you're a huge Celtics fan, and that's not the part that resonates with me. I'm a Knicks fan. Sorry, not really. You started your own Celtics blog when you were 10 years old. Tell me a little bit about that and what inspired you from such a young age to write about one of the NBA's original legacy teams.
Yeah, I grew up a big Celtics fan, and I think it was right around the time that I started playing basketball that I started watching it, middle school, and it was so cool because I was falling in love with the game, and then I'd be done practicing, and then I'd turn on the TV, and the Celtics were always pretty good. When I was in middle school, that was the end of the Big Three era, beginning of the kind of middling years, which they honestly weren't bad for very long. But I felt this obsession with watching the Celtics and talking about it and talking about the NBA at large with my dad, who kind of introduced me to basketball. And it got to the point where I was I need to kind of do something with this, because it's if you obsess over something and you have no outlet to do something with it, it's not a great feeling. But as soon as you can kind of actualize that into something, then it can actually be pretty gratifying. So that was the initial thing that drew me into blogging about the team. And I had a blog, and I remember all the time I would look up the page views to see who was on it. And honestly, I didn't even buy the domain, so it was .weebly.com. And so I don't know how anybody found it, but I would track one person in Japan opened up the site, and I would be oh my God, that's awesome. And so yeah, I would just kind of write like my takes, and I would write game recaps, like the most useless things you could think of. But I think it got me in the habit of just viewing the game as someone that's going to commentate on it in a way.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, I didn't end up pursuing journalism as a career initially because I had actually kind of long story, but I got some advice and heard from people just like how difficult of a field it was to make it in, and how you might say you want to be a Celtics reporter, but you'll probably end up being a high school girls hockey reporter because there's so few options that you're not going to land exactly what you intend. But I was like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to cover other sports. I have no interest in any other sport. And so I think I ended up kind of stepping away, but when I came back into it, it was that same feeling that I had when I was a kid, where I was like, okay, I'm a 25-year-old adult, and I'm like watching every Celtics game, and I have all these opinions and all these ideas, and like it's kind of a waste if I don't do something with it. And I think a lot of people kind of probably resonate with that feeling a little bit, and that's what brought me
I
back
certainly
into
do.
yeah, this is as a career.
Yeah. Wow, that's really interesting. What was kind of the turning point for you then when you said like I really want to be intentional about this again?
Yeah, honestly, I would always read Celtics blog, and I was working as an environmental lobbyist out of school. I majored in political science, got my master's in
Yeah.
policy. Like I was totally in that career, and I honestly liked the job. Like it wasn't that I was unhappy, but I just couldn't see myself doing it long term. Like I just couldn't picture 10 years passing and me still going to the state house and flying around to different capital cities and meeting with legislators. Like I just couldn't picture it. But I didn't see another world because that was what I studied and that's what I had to experience, and I had a resume and all that.
Yeah.
But I was kind of surfing Celtics blog one day, and had just that week decided like, wouldn't it be cool if I could work in this field somehow? I don't know like if that's even possible. And that day, like literally the day that I had this thought, they posted on the site like we're hiring for like monthly writers, which I
No
now know
way.
only happens once a year. So it was kind of ironic. Yeah, I didn't know that it was going to be that week. And I worked really hard on my application because it felt kind of like just the fact that the application was there that day. Like it's so rare that there's any job openings in this space that the fact that that was a thing, and it was for beginners. It was an entry level like $100 a month stipend, just to kind of get your name in the mix and to get some reps and experience. And I applied and I ended up getting that. And I had no idea. I remember the day I got that email, I had no idea what a door was opening in that moment. Like I thought to myself, this is cool. I get paid $100 for writing about the Celtics. Like that's pretty cool. I get paid for this. No part of me would have pictured that, a year later I'd be in the building for the championship, game, and I'd be covering the finals, and then I would have a full-time job after. So the fact that that was the initial thing, like I'm forever grateful for Celtics blog and for the opportunity to let like entry-level writers kind of throw their hat in the ring a little bit.
What was it like covering the 2024 finals? Because I mean, hell of a series too, but I mean, you really didn't think you were going to be in that room. Now you're at the biggest game of the year.
Yeah, it was incredible. I think for me, I didn't even know if I was gonna have credentials for like the playoff games. I was splitting credentials with a couple other people during the season, so I was going to like
Yeah.
every couple of games, and then I was like, is the NBA gonna like accredit me for the finals? I don't know. But once it became clear that like I was able to go to these games, I just wanted to make the most of every single aspect of it. So I was still working full time as an environmental lobbyist at this point, but I was traveling on my own dime to all the away games. I started like a daily live show where I shared updates from the finals and on the ground and everything. Like I was doing everything I could possibly do. I was writing 2 articles a day, like acting like it was my full-time job, and I had an editor telling me they needed more from me, more just because I was like, this is an opportunity of a lifetime. Like you could cover the NBA for 50 years and never cover a championship, and I'm getting the access and the opportunity to do so in the first year. And what's
Right.
funny is once you're in the building, like I was asking questions in the post championship game press conference. Like once you're there, it doesn't matter if you're Brian Windhorst or if you're me. Like if you raise your hand, you're probably going to be able to ask a question, especially because I had been covering the team all year, so I had relationships with players and people knew me. So it was kind of remarkable, but like the opportunity to be there was one that I never would have predicted, so I wanted to make the most of it. And I probably overdid it. Like I barely slept the entire championship, playoff run. But I
Yeah.
knew that it's not something that the same way that players don't take it for granted and coaches don't. Like reporters aren't fans, and I definitely have lost a lot of that fandom that I had growing up. But you do, from a career standpoint, like everybody wants the team they cover to go far and to experience the emotions and the storylines and everything. So it was a very exciting time for sure.
What do you think you would tell 10-year-old Noah now?
I guess, one thing that I did learn is the idea of something being realistic is not always like the advice that you need to follow. Like obviously, if someone was to tell me, I want to be a movie star and this is what I'm going to do, like I think as an adult, your instinct is to be like, well, that's a really low probability career, and like a lot of people want to be movie stars, but only a small percentage of those people make it. But if
Yeah.
everybody had the mindset of like going by statistics, then I think a lot of talented people or a lot of dreams wouldn't have been lived out. So I almost regret the fact that I let that deter me. But it's not right. It's not like it ended up being completely fine, but it is pretty fascinating because it was all I could think about when I was 10 was like, or 11. I was like, I want to be a Celtics writer. Like I want to be a Celtics reporter. I want to be at all the games for free, and I want to interview the players after, and I want to stand there with a mic and then I didn't do any of the things that I needed to do to get there. Like I didn't go to journalism school. I never took a TV broadcast class. So I feel like I got a little lucky, but at the same time, like I sometimes go back and I'm like, how did this all work out? After every Celtics game for years, my dad and I would have a phone call for an hour. We'd break down the entire game. And so it's like I had practice talking about the game, not for an audience, but like I did work that muscle all the time. And so, yes, it's not, education, but sometimes like actually living the career you want to have is almost more beneficial. And I see this actually with a lot of my friends that are all in different fields. Like actually most of us don't work in the field that we studied. Most of us work in the thing that we obsess over and taught ourselves and self-created and all of that. So there is a lot of different ways life can go, and I think I've kind of lived out a couple different careers and a couple different dreams, and this is certainly like a lesson that I've taken with me, is to not kind of set boundaries on what you can and can't do.
Totally. And isn't that better anyway, to do what you love and live the career that you love and maybe not like intentionally studied for?
I think so. Yeah, I certainly enjoy it. Like, I think I take it less for granted, knowing that I didn't have this job for a while, and I think none of it feels like work because I worked a real job where you have to have meetings that you don't want to be a part of, and you have to send emails that you don't want to send, and you have like actual work. Like this doesn't feel like work, so I think it makes me more
Totally.
grateful for that as well, knowing that I've done the other thing. And when people want to complain around about like, oh, our schedule's been busy, it's like I think a lot of people forget what the alternative is and like how fun this is as
Right.
a career.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you were bringing it up a lot before, but you did have a career in like environmental policy, and I know you're very passionate about social justice, and I'm curious, like what sparked that passion for you? I see you posting on your LinkedIn all the time about it, and I'm curious where that passion came from.
Yeah, so that's what that was going to be my career. Like, I think growing up, I saw there were so many problems in the world, and so it was just a question of which problem do I want to address? Like, how do you even pick? And I think,
Yeah.
like, honestly, the environmental one wasn't even the thing that I was the most drawn to. It was kind of just by coincidence, like, the first internship I got was in environmental policy, and therefore, like, once you have that, it kind of sets you on this course where now you're an environmental policy person. But there were a lot of issues that I was interested in. Like, I had like a club for Syrian refugees in high school that I worked on fundraising for that cause, and I was really interested in like immigration policy for a long time and took a lot of classes about that in college. So I think for me it was just like, how do I pick one thing when there are so many injustices in the world? And then I ended up working in environmental policy, specifically in food policy, because I thought that it was something that not a lot of people were working on in food policy. Like, it's one of the less addressed aspects of, emissions and greenhouse gases and all of that was from food. And so I did that for a few years, but I think politics just weren't for me. So I realized, like, as much as I care about that issue, it just wasn't the space or wasn't the way that I wanted to enact change. And my first year and a half on the Celtics beat, or first 2 years really, I didn't want to mix like my passion for social justice with basketball, because I didn't want people to think, okay, the one girl that covers the Celtics, because I'm the only one on the beat that's a woman, like she's also always preaching about like all these issues. Like I want them to take me seriously as a basketball voice.
Right.
And so I was kind of cautious and I kind of kept those things separate. And really just this past summer, I thought about it and I was like, I now have a platform that I never would have dreamed of having, that if I post a fundraising link or if I express a view about something or draw attention to an injustice, like way more people are seeing that than they would have a couple years back. And so where I've kind of landed now is that I can connect the two, and the fact that I do have like some credibility in the space or some followers or fans or whatever, however you want to call it, like I should use that platform to do good things with it. So I feel like I've been able to make almost more of an impact in the last few months just using my platform as a Celtics reporter and a WNBA reporter than I was able to when I was working full-time in nonprofits, because I have like the resources to do that where I didn't really have it before.
So for people who don't know, can you expand a little bit about like the specifics of like that lobbying that you were doing with environmental policy or social justice? I know you just mentioned like the food inequality, which is obviously a big problem, but do you mind going into a little bit more specifics for people who don't really know what that kind of world is like?
Yeah, for sure. I think the exact issue I was working on was factory farming, which is the industrialized animal agriculture, where 99% of the meat in this country comes from a factory farm, which means that the meat that's served in restaurants, that's sold to the grocery store, it comes from where there's tens of thousands of animals in confined spaces with no air, water. Like it's really brutal conditions. It's all different gases, methane emissions in enclosed spaces. So it's really unhealthy for workers. It's really unhealthy for consumers because there's all sorts of issues with the meat consumption. And then there's also ethical questions. But there's a ton of downsides to this farming system. It's not the way that meat used to be produced in this country.
Right.
And it's one of the leading causes for climate change. And it's something that people don't really know about. I actually grew up vegetarian. And so I was like more open to learning about this stuff, because I think that when you're eating a burger, it's hard to then also be reading a book about like how the burger is so harmful. But when you're not eating the burger, you're more open to learning about the injustices. And I think that applies for a lot of different things. Like when you're a part of if you feel like you're responsible for the problem, you probably don't want to learn about it, versus if you're not responsible, you're open to learning about it. And that's the way kind of my brain worked. So I ended up, I studied environmental policy, but then I realized that the food aspect, and specifically meat and dairy consumption, was the thing that was not being addressed. Like we have clean energy, we have electric vehicles, we have a lot of alternatives now to the harmful parts of society and people working in those fields. But when it comes to meat and dairy, we don't really have as much policy or innovation. And so that's what I wanted to kind of focus on. And I did do it for a few years. And actually I still do it on the side a couple hours a week. So it's something that I'm still like a contract lobbyist for. But I was meeting with legislators trying to pass legislation that was going to create alternatives to meat and dairy products that are healthy, sustainable, invest in research, invest in funding. So a whole bunch of different things. And it's a tough issue to work on because most of the people you're talking to eat meat and love meat. So they're not like super keen on wanting to learn about the injustices with the system. But you learn to do it, you learn to be effective. And it's definitely something that I remain very passionate about. And it's what I did my master's on. I did a thesis on the environmental injustices and kind of the racial, impact as well on different communities. So definitely something that I've spent a lot of my life kind of thinking and working on.
That's incredible. I know you said before that you originally tried to keep those two kind of worlds separate, but has it been what's it been like? What has it been like to kind of slightly integrate those two together? Because you did say that you kind of publicize about it now. I mean, I've seen you talk about it, on social. What's it been like to kind of reintegrate those together?
Yeah, to be honest, I haven't done a ton with the food policy stuff. Like maybe down the road, I probably will down the road at some point. What I've been doing this summer is fundraising for direct aid in Gaza. That's been a big focus of mine. So that's more what I've kind of what I've used the platform to do. Where I was donating a long time in private, which was always kind of my approach to donating to causes I cared about, and I kind of viewed it as like, it's like almost like virtue signaling to like post it on Twitter. Like I don't need to like have the whole world know what I'm donating to. But then I realized that if I use the platform to do like donation matching, or if I share what I'm raising money for, I can get other people to donate. And really amplify the impact of like $1. So that's been honestly like a light bulb moment for me this past summer, and it's made me think a lot about like platforms and how like if I feel like I have an enormous platform, like what about like real celebrities that have like massive followings, and what can they do if they just decide they want to? So I think we've raised like $30,000 or something in that ballpark in just a few months.
That's incredible.
And I didn't have $30,000 to donate myself, so it has totally amplified the impact and kind of working directly with people on the ground that have like very immediate needs. So that's been something that, it was just like the start, but I could see if I plan on having a long career in this field and hopefully continuing to have a large platform. And so I want to make sure that I'm always using that as best as I can while walking a fine line. Like I don't want to always be preaching about every single injustice in the world, and people don't follow me for that. But if I pick and choose my spots, then hopefully I can kind of continue to live out the desire to like make some social change in addition to living out the dream of covering basketball, which ultimately makes me very happy.
Yeah, of course. I know that you were originally nervous at first because you didn't want to be viewed, as a woman in this space, just there to like, obviously cover basketball, but you didn't want initially the blending of like social justice to like creep in there. But it's honestly really a big fabric of what the NBA landscape is. I mean, a lot of players advocate for this stuff too. Have you talked to some of them about it at all?
Yeah, not to the players, no. I try, I think try to keep, especially stuff that's, potentially contentious or whatever, I try to keep that stuff separate. But, again, I'm really early in my career, so I've been, like, I'm still kind of navigating what the boundaries are with those kinds of things and certain conversations to have and not have. Like, this was my first year having locker room access, and that totally changed the way to, you can communicate with players and all of that. So far, I've kept the two things pretty separate. I think I'm in the very early stages of figuring out how to potentially kind of blend the two. But a lot of what I have done is, a lot of the players do really cool things in the community. Like Jaylen Brown does a ton of stuff giving back to youth and working on racial injustice and kind of all sorts of things. And I make sure to go to those events and cover those events because a lot of times that stuff kind of flies under the radar, and I do think it's important to amplify it. And so I guess that's the place where those two kind of passions have intersected the most. Is I think a lot of fans that read my articles and follow my work know that when there's like a community thing going on or some sort of social justice initiative that a player is working on, that I always want to be kind of right at the forefront covering that.
Yeah, 100%. No, I think that's great. So something I end all episodes with is, professionalism aside, just about you as a person. Noah Dalzell, what do you like most or admire about yourself?
I think it's kind of it's an interesting question. I think I appreciate my ability to like execute on ideas in a way. Like I think whenever I have a thought or like I realize that something is upsetting or I have a dream or whatever, like I go out and do it. And I view it as more of like a skill than like a mindset. Like I think I just know how to actualize things in a way. But it's something that I do admire or appreciate about myself, and I'm glad that I have that ability. I don't know exactly where it came from, probably my parents. But I always feel like when I see a problem or I want to make a change that I kind of know how to go about that. And even the Celtics thing, like it was kind of 0 to 100, and to a lot of people that don't know me, it's very confusing. Like, how did that even happen? And not to sound cocky, but I think a lot of people that did know me were like, it's very classic that like that's the way that it would go, because when I'm passionate about something, I put everything into it. So that's probably the top thing, I would say.
I love that. That's so awesome. Well, Noah, thanks so much for coming on. It was really great to hear your story, and I'm really excited to, see your coverage, for the rest of the WNBA season, and, also, as we get into the next NBA season.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
This episode is brought to you by Digital Sport by Hot Paper Lantern, a division of the PR, brand, and marketing agency Hot Paper Lantern. Digital Sport by Hot Paper Lantern helps brands grow at the intersection of sports, tech, and gaming. Learn more at hpldigitalsport.com or find them on LinkedIn at Digital Sport by Hot Paper Lantern.